Good afternoon, Death Valley Insiders, LSU Tiger fans, all you guys. Another heart wrenching, gut wrenching victory for LSU, 49-39 over Missouri. Again, another one of those dreadful 11 a.m. kicks. However, let's look at the bright side of things. 11 a.m. kick means you get done early, means you can get the rest of your day going early. You don't have to sit around all day in anticipation of what's going to happen and then end your night on a bad night. You can actually, if this game would not have gone as planned or as everyone would have liked, you have the rest of your day to make up for it. However, they pulled it out, started off slow again. And I know I got in back and forth with a couple of people about the slow start, momentum shifts, and whatnot in the live game there. But hey, I mean, that's my opinion. That's y'all's opinion. We can agree to disagree. No worries. But again, I'm Jermaine, every analyst here at Death Valley Insider, hosting the fifth quarter live post-game show after a 49-39 LSU win over the Missouri Tigers up in Columbia. The game was. It started off again, like I said, they've only started off one game hot this year, and that was their only other 11 a.m. kick against Mississippi State, where they were just firing on all cylinders from beginning to end. There was no lack. There may have been a few lulls in their play, in the consistency and quality of their play, but there was no heavy lulls or lacks or anything like that in their play in that game. I mean, they just started off firing on all cylinders. They kept firing on all cylinders in that game. This game, again, 11 a.m. kick. They start off really slow, sluggish. They're down 22-7 at one point. From being down 22-7, the Harold Perkins Jr. interception, where he was actually in a linebacker position and kind of got close to the line of scrimmage, feigned the blitz, and then dropped back into coverage. Luther Burden III, their star wide receiver, one of the better wide receivers in the country, he was lined up in the slot. And he had been eating LSU up on a simple post route, just a simple little, I can't really say a skinny post because sometimes he'd skinny it out, sometimes he'd deepen it out. It just depends. But he would run basically a post route from that slot position and get right behind the linebackers, right in front of the safety, find that hole in the zone, and just kind of flatten his route out and left himself wide open several times on the exact same play. Well, this time LSU decided to say, hey, you know what? Let's bracket coverage him. But we're going to put Perkins over there instead of one of the other linebackers. Now, the difference is just total instincts in reading the play and knowing who to guard, where to be, and whatnot. And this is something that I remember before the season kind of started a little bit. I was telling Jefferson, our publisher, Jefferson Powell, he and I were having some conversations about the team and how things would go and whatnot. And I said, I think that they may use him in coverage sometimes, like kind of that pseudo safety nickelback kind of thing. I said, this thing I've been seeing, with defenses these last, 5 or so years, that they've been trying to just move around their best athletes in the best positions to take best advantage of what they do best. And Perkins is a guy who can actually turn and run with a lot of receivers, tight ends, running backs, whatnot. He's a very, athletic guy. Lo and behold, on this play, he's basically playing the underneath of the bracket, because the bracket coverage is you play a guy over the top, you play a guy underneath. You kind of stay around him to bracket him, hence the term. And that way you kind of create a shell around him. A straight up double team can just mean you both are running next to him. You don't really have an assigned position. But if you know for sure you're in a bracket coverage and you're the over the top guy, you don't let him get behind you. You stay over the top of him. You keep him in front of you. And if you're the underneath guy, you don't let him, get underneath you. You stay with your back to him, kind of hips turned or what have you, kind of trailing him and following him around, basically, staying behind him. So it's a little bit different from a straight double team, but he played it perfectly. He turned his hips, ran with Burden, and kept his eyes on the quarterback, and Cook just didn't see him underneath. I don't I can't explain how, but it happens where a quarterback is looking in that instance and they just don't see that underneath guy. You just don't see him, and he threw it right to him. Perkins had to turn, jump up, and make a pretty athletic play, with a nice two-handed catch on that interception. And that right there is where the game turned. And that's what I meant when I said the momentum shifted earlier. Yes, you'll see ebbs and flows of momentum here and there. But if we're looking at that play in a vacuum, at that moment in time, it's 22-7. This team is getting its teeth kicked in, both sides of the ball. The offense is looking terrible, and the defense can't get a stop. There's just nothing going right for him. Harold Perkins Jr. makes that interception. From that point forward, LSU outscored Missouri 42-17. 42-17, because it was 22-7 at that point. From that interception forward, LSU outscored them 42-17. So again, let me reiterate, when I say it was a momentum shifter, it changed the tide. It changed the tide of the flow of the game in that very moment, because they took that interception. The offense felt fueled. They went down the field and scored. Hey, field goal or not, they scored. They did something with the ball. But what was it after that play? Give me 1 second. Let me see. They scored a field goal. No, I'm sorry. They scored a touchdown after the interception. It was 22-10 when they got the interception. I'm sorry. So they outscored them 39-17 after that play. I kept getting my notes wrong, and I'm looking over it now, and I'm looking at the actual play-by-play, and I wrote my notes down wrong. But yeah, it was 22-10 at that point when he made that interception. They scored the touchdown. It's 22-17. They give up a little bit of momentum right before the half and give up a field goal, made it 25-17 at the half. But again, still from that point on, LSU outscored them 39-17. And if you look at a 39-17 score in any stretch of a game, it's a blowout. So that's kind of what I meant when I said that. Everything pretty much changed right then and there on that play. Now, there was still some times LSU gave up some points. They gave up some really easy drives thereafter. However, you saw the defense playing a little bit more inspired. They were still just missed assignments, missed tackles, way too much cushion, not enough pressure on the quarterback, letting him escape out of the pocket, leaving open run lanes. And one of the most egregious things that this team does, and it drives me nuts as a football person, is you're going for the strip instead of going for the tackle. And that you just cannot have. So just looking at the way the game went and how this team plays on defense, they still have some very critical errors that they have to answer for. And that's not a coaching thing. That comes from within you as a player. You have to make that commitment to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to wrap up and tackle. I'm going to give a damn on this play. I'm going to actually, take a good angle and pursue the guy and run as hard as I can. I'm going to try to make a good form tackle. I'm going to try to bring him down. I'm not going to try to just strip and go for the ball. I'm not going to do the shoulder tackle thing, where I just try to grab him around the shoulders and wrestle him down. I'm not going to try to fire in as a missile, trying to lay the kill shot and then, only to get bounced off of or made a highlight reel of because the guy shook me because I'm coming in, hard, fast, and heavy. So it's just, this team has to get better at tackling. It's painful to watch at some points where you're just looking at them and the way they're just grasping at players and, the whole arm tug thing and whatnot, trying to, cause a turnover. Hey, if you're going after a guy and you're trying to wrap him up and one of your arms that you're trying to wrap him up with, you decide to punch down or punch up or something like that while you're trying to wrap him up. Hey, that's one thing. But to reach out with both hands and just try to grab the arm or grab the ball or something like that, and not actually wrap the player up around his waist or something, that can't you can't keep continuing to try to tackle like that. That's just unacceptable. Um, but I know when I'm writing by the numbers today, typically sometimes I'll mess around with you guys and I'll put uh, a drink or something like that. Today's drink is actually going to be, it's one of those things where people look at the price point and they look at what it is and they think, oh, this guy's drinking Evan Williams. But Evan Williams Bottle and Bond actually won some awards for a best tasting bourbon. It's a bottom of the shelf because it's only about $25 or so for like a big handle of it, or like $15 or so for a fifth. But I figure when you win a game like this, an 11 a.m. kickoff on the road, where you're getting your head beat in for most of the game, but you somehow manage to pull out a victory, you don't deserve top shelf drinks from the post game host. You just do not. You still deserve a drink, but you do not get a top shelf drink. So LSU today will get a pour of Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, something that's still decent. It's an award-winning bourbon, but it's also something that is not that pricey. So cheers to LSU for their 49-39 win. That is going to be the number one, just one. They only get one because even though they stressed people out, I could see through the chat. It was just one of those victories that you're glad you're glad your team won the game if you're a fan, but you still don't feel easy about their prospects for the remainder of the season itself. So just taking a look, next week is always a fun game when they play Auburn. Always a fun game. So it's another Tiger on Tiger violence game, is like I like to call it. Auburn is another team that's always going to field a very competitive squad. They're always going to have NFL ready guys on both sides of the ball. That's not going to be an easy victory. However, one thing I can almost assure you of is that that game will not be an 11 a.m. kickoff. So even though LSU is 2-0 so far this year on those 11 a.m. kickoffs, I'd still rather see a later game to let them get more into their rhythm. And it's going to be a home game as well. So I'd imagine that game will probably kick off no earlier than maybe 5-6 o'clock next weekend. But looking back, again, getting back to this game, I just feel this team is going to worry the bejesus out of everybody because the defense can't stop anyone. And it seems like the defense is almost getting worse. They're getting worse as the season goes along. They're not getting any better. And it's as if everyone has film on them now, and they not only see their deficiencies, but they're knowing how to take advantage of them, and there aren't being adjustments made in order to correct some of these simple mistakes that they're seemingly making. For example, it looks as if they're in it looks as if they're in like a cover three when that chasm opens up between those two linebackers in that short zone. Because if they were in a cover two, there would be a linebacker pretty much in the middle of the field, in the middle, almost direct over center of the quarterback, kind of dropping back in a short zone. And unfortunately, that space is where defenses are finding these slant routes that are cutting into that space, in between, underneath the one linebacker and in between them, post routes between the two of them, or if there's a deep dig route that's coming across that middle, the deep crossing routes, that loop around. Whatever it is, they're finding that space between those two linebackers in the middle of the field, or they're finding that space between the linebacker and the safety that's coming down to play that cloud zone. So there's so many different things that this defense is doing as far as the zone is concerned. And then I see some people talking about, well, why don't they play man? Well, when they play man, the D line isn't getting any pressure, and so these corners and linebackers are getting torched. So when your front four isn't applying any pressure, it doesn't bode well for the DBs. How can they cover for 4, 5, 6 seconds at a time when the D line isn't getting any pressure? And that's what ends up happening. Usually a quarterback has about 2.5, 3, maybe 3.5 seconds to throw. About 3 seconds, roughly, is what they call it. So if you don't give him at least those 3 seconds and you're getting pressure there, well, then you're good. But when you're giving him 4, 5, and 6 seconds to make a decision, eventually he's going to find someone open, whether it's a zone or man. It doesn't matter what the play call is. The execution needs to be there. Now, I will say this: the natives are growing restless, and fans are definitely talking about firing Matt House at various points throughout the game the last few weeks. After that game last week, I would say it was very warranted. After today's game, I would say it's still warranted. However, getting rid of him right this very second in the middle of the season, is it going to change much? Maybe, maybe not. But I don't think that that would be the best answer to the defensive woes that this team has, because firing him and getting a different play caller in there, or taking away his play calling duties for that matter and leaving him on the staff, it still doesn't change the fact that the defensive line isn't getting pressure. It still doesn't change the fact that the DBs are giving way too much of a cushion and aren't doing that. That might change with the way the new play caller wants to call plays. Who knows? However, there's certain things that, like, there's guys that when they ran the same play that Perkins got the interception on, but this time Perkins was on the opposite side of the formation from Luther Burden. And they went right back to Luther Burden because he was on the left side, the trip side of the formation. Perkins was on the shorter side of the formation. And I looked up, and when there was an incompletion, it was Greg Penn who was on the other side, the trip side of that formation. And when he dropped back in his zone, he took the guy who was going more towards the flat. And as he vacated that short zone right there in the middle, boom, Cook found Burden open again on another little, that's when he skinnied that post off, kind of like a short slant almost, when he got that pass in there, simply because when Perkins was dropping back, Perkins was looking like, hey, you know what, I'm going to give up that underneath throw over there to that flat because I feel confident in my sideline to sideline speed to plant and take off and get after that guy should he happen to go that way. However, I know if I give up this pass over my head in the middle of this field to Burden, Burden is a threat to take it the distance, so I need to make sure I cover him. All he did was he feigned, the blitz. As the ball was snapped, he dropped back into coverage. He kept his eye on both guys. When Burden turned, he turned. And he met the ball right there, two-handed it, boom. That's what caused that interception. That's how he got that interception. Almost exact same play called, similar play, similar route, I'll say, run by Burden, except Penn, went after the guy who was in the flat. I'm not sure if that was the play that was called or what. I just saw him drop back into a zone. He didn't have a man responsibility because he did not turn and run and seek a man and run with him at the snap of the ball. He dropped in the zone, and then he kind of faded off to the side. And as he widened out to see more of where the guy in the flat was going, that opened up that zone right there behind him, and Cook found Burton. But it's little things like that I can't say that, that wasn't his assignment to go with the guy in the flat. Who knows? He could have had the flat assignment and the other linebacker was supposed to come over. Maybe the safety come down in like a buzz type of play. But maybe they shifted the coverage. Who knows? I don't know. But it just looked like It was a very similar play call on defense and on offense. One guy made a good play, it turned into an interception. Another guy did not make the right read or right play, and it turned into a large gain. So there you have it. But one of the things that I always look at, and I know I'm going to put this in my by the numbers, is the big plays. And there were way too many big plays for way too many yards yet again for the opposing team throughout the pass game for LSU. A big play is a gain of 15 or more through the air, 10 or more on the ground. Missouri had 11 of those for 268 through the air. They had 6 for 122 on the ground. That's averaging about 20 yards a run on those big plays, and about about 20 or so as well on through the air. So you're looking at of 24. I'm sorry. You're looking at again this defense just giving up way too many big plays. That's a total of 17 plays for 390 yards. 17 plays for 390 yards. If a team is getting 23 yards a pop on those big plays, that's not a good sign. It's not a good number. You don't want to give up so many chunk plays, because what happens when you give up chunk plays like that, especially a team like LSU, when they're giving them up on third downs and whatnot, those are the absolute worst. And again, in this game, LSU was they only gave up 4 out of 11 third down conversions, 1 out of 2 fourth down conversions. So they were good. But when I start diving into the numbers, I always take a look at the quarter by quarter stats so I can see like how the game started and how the game finished and how it played out. Again, going back to a comment in the thread earlier, that's why I say this team started out slow again, is because I look at the progression of the game while I'm watching the game, and I'm taking notes and whatnot, and I'm seeing how they play, and it just seems like in a boxing analogy, LSU is more of a counterpuncher. They're not an attacker. They don't attack very well. They counterpunch very well. So if you come out and you're laying that jab out there, kind of tapping it, patting it out there, and then you're every so often coming with a 1-2 combo, they're gonna feel you out and then fight back. Now, whether or not you're getting in shots on them or whatnot, and you're punching them, you're getting in your licks, and they're just kind of sitting back taking it, like they did this game when they started off down 22-7. They're getting rocked against the ropes, and they're getting cornered and getting bullied and pushed around the ring, and they're not really landing anything. And every so often they may land something here or there, but they're not really doing anything significant. And then in those middle rounds, okay, I feel you out now. You make a good mistake, and boom, they catch you with one. Okay, that was like the Perkins interception. They come back, boom, they catch you with another one. They score off of that. They let you end the round with the flurry. That's the little field goal before halftime. Okay, now that we're getting into the later rounds and then in the championship rounds, okay, now we're going to really take control of this game. And that's what I'm talking about when I say this team is more of a they feel more comfortable coming from behind or letting the opponent kind of dictate the pace or how this game is going to go or play out or what have you. And then they fight back. The Florida State game started off like that. They couldn't really figure anything out, never really got anything going, and ended up losing the fight. Similarly, if you watched the Jermell Charlo and Canelo fight this past weekend, the Charlo-Canelo fight, Charlo never really got going. He never really did anything. Every so often, he would land a few punches here and there, but he never did anything of any significance. Canelo let him start off, saying, hey, I'm going to let you dictate the fight. He didn't punch back, so Canelo just took over and just beat him for the rest of the fight, and it wasn't even close. That's kind of what LSU did when they played against Grambling. That's kind of what they did when they played against Mississippi State. Grambling started off hot and on fire. LSU was letting them get their plays in. They were letting them get off. They snapped into it, realized who they were, took over, and the rest of it was history. Same way Canelo did Charlo this past weekend. The Mississippi State game, LSU started off from the get-go like saying, hey, you know what? We're going to feel you out. However, we're about to steamroll you now because we're LSU and you're not. They took over, never let go. The game against Ole Miss, they just played around, and before you know it, Ole Miss is up on points. And the judges are giving most of these rounds to Ole Miss, and now it's hard for LSU to come back. They come back and they steal a few rounds, and now it's looking like they may win the fight. And then, 10th, 11th, 12th round, they just fall apart and lose the fight on points because they just got outboxed. Well, this game started off the same way. LSU starts, letting Missouri win the first few rounds. Missouri's looking like they're going to pull off the upset. LSU doesn't have an answer for them. LSU fights back. They start to get back into the game. Missouri still has a lead. Later on in the fight, LSU starts wearing them down. Missouri can't, they can't hang. They're trying to fight back. Eventually, LSU just overpowers them in the end. And when I did crosstalk earlier this week with Power Mizzou's Gerard made sure we talked about how would this game end and how did we think that these guys would do. And I said, you know what? I really think that it's going to come down to the final mistake or the final the whoever makes the last mistake or whoever sustains the last drive with the lead, that's the team that's going to win. And I just believed in Jane Daniels over Cook. I just believed in Daniels over Cook. And so when we were talking about it, I predicted the score would be 38-34 LSU. And that's what I sent in my predictions and everything. So once I saw that, I saw the way this game was going, and I'm just like, hey, I think that this is the way this game is going to end up ending because they started going back and forth. LSU got the lead. They were up 42-39. Everybody's saying, hey, it's too much time left. One crucial mistake by Cook gets a pick six by Burns. Game over. So this was a very back and forth game that really, it surprised a lot of people, but I wasn't really surprised at all that the game was close. I was not surprised that, again, the over hit, like AJ predicted from pregame.com. If you check that article out every week, AJ puts out a gambling article on how you should bet this game, LSU games. The one thing that did kind of throw everything off was that pick six for a touchdown because most of us had Missouri covering the point spread, and that took that away from everybody. So if you bet that, Missouri would cover, that pick six was a bad beat. So I'm imagining that's going to be on Scott Van Pelt's Bad Beat segment on ESPN. But man, that was it was a great play. When a team has their back against the wall and they're forced to do things and they're forced to pass like this team was in those situations, and LSU's defense has not been good against the pass all year against any opponent, you kind of think that the opponent has more of a shot than what they should. But kudos LSU's defense. They came up with some timely stops, some timely turnovers. The one in the first half was to stop the bleeding and kind of change the tide of the game. And the one at the end of the game was basically to seal the victory. So, I mean, this team just, man, it's rough to watch these guys. I tell you, it's really rough to watch them because they play sloppily. And one thing that really kind of caught my eye, and I know some people in the chat noticed it as well, was the lack of passing to start this game off with. I believe Jay Daniels didn't hit 20 attempts until sometime in the fourth quarter. Normally, that's something that he'd be approaching, towards halftime, maybe the third quarter at the most. But to get to 20 attempts finally, like sometime in the fourth quarter, that was kind of odd. The run game was working fairly well. Jaden himself had 15 for 130 and a touchdown. Logan Diggs, another bell cow day, 24 carries, 134 and a touchdown. So those guys were the main ones. Josh Williams had a couple carries for 10 yards. Malik Neighbors had one for that 1 yard play. That was just, man, I just wish they could have got Malik better blocking on that play when he ran that little jet sweep, little handoff deal, because I really think that he could have turned that into something more. But I'm interested to see them use more of those type of plays, getting guys the ball in different positions and whatnot. I'd really be interested to see what they would do with Chris Hilton Jr. In one of those positions, because to have a guy on your team with legit track speed like that, that'd be pretty cool to see what he can do. Getting him the ball on those bubble screens and those jet sweeps, all those little. Even that little, there's one play where the guy kind of comes in motion. He goes out to the slot, pivots and turns back around, and there's like a shovel pass option there. So there's all sorts of ways to get these guys the ball in different spaces and whatnot, to take advantage of their speed, their athleticism, and to kind of throw the defense off. So I would love to see a little bit more creativity on offense. But for the most part, the offense is going good. There's not much to complain about. Maybe clean up some of the penalties, because there were a couple of false starts and a couple of holding penalties there. Like the freshman tight end, 88, who had that, what's his name? He had that holding penalty on the Malik touchdown run that got called back, and then had another penalty, and that got pushed back. And Kamorian Pimpton, just a bad hold. The D end, he sealed him off great. But when the defender turns, you have and he turns his shoulders, you have to turn them loose. They're gonna throw the flag every time they see the defender's shoulders turn. They see that jersey pull. That's an automatic flag pull for a referee looking at something like that. So talking to several different people that I know that are officials and whatnot, they say it's almost like clockwork when they see that type of play, especially if a defender is throwing his hands up to exasperate the motion. They got to throw the flag on that. Now, there were some crazy penalties in this game. The disconcerting signals penalty. Learn something new every day. Had no clue whatsoever that was an actual thing that you could get flagged for. Basically, what happens is, and this is the way the announcers, RG3, and the guys over at ESPN explained it. If the offense uses a clap as a signal, from that point forward, the defense is not allowed to clap as a signal. They're not allowed to clap. So if the guys on offense, they can come out first play of the game, first series of the game, what have you. If they clap, the defense cannot clap. The defense has to find another way to use a signal besides a clap, because that's now a disconcerting signal. It results in, I believe, a 5-yard penalty. Replay the down. I don't think it's I didn't see it called as an automatic first down penalty, but it is a 5-yard penalty. Saw that called a couple of times on LSU. Saw it called a couple of times on Mizzou, from what I can recall. I know Mizzou got it twice, and I think LSU got it, I know, once for sure, maybe twice themselves. So that was fairly new to me. I've been watching football since I can remember. I've never heard of this penalty ever in my life. I actually had to Google it because I just thought the ref forgot what the actual penalty was and just said something. So I Googled it, and then I heard him call it again. And that's when I was just like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is really something. I have never heard that call before in my life. This is the first time I've ever heard it called. So excuse me if I got off on a little bit of a tangent, but it really threw me for a loop that was an actual penalty. And I believe the guys on the announce team were talking about it, that the NCAA really needs to do something about that, because you can't prohibit the defense from clapping if the offense claps. Like, that's just stupid. Like, there's some pretty dumb penalties in football. Like some of the penalties they call about roughing the passer and whatnot, and certain things like that. Some of the defensive holding or illegal contact penalties and some of that crap. And, I'm all for, scoring points. If you have a great offense and you can score points, or if you can just maul the other team and dictate your way. But there's a way too many penalties for the offense and not enough penalties that help the defense, or lack thereof. But that's one that just definitely has to be changed. I feel as strongly about that one as, like I said, the some of the pass interference, illegal contact, defensive holding penalties that they call on pass plays mainly, as well as the roughing the passer stuff. And the one that I don't like that penalizes the offense is the touchback rule. I know this was a major deal a few weeks ago. I believe it was an NFL game that had happened, and it ended up costing the team big time. But I just don't feel as though a fumble, if it goes, a foot one way or the other, will determine if it's still your ball or if the other team gets the ball. Like, a fumble out of the end zone should not result in a touchback and possession changing. I think, if anything, it should be a touchback. Now, the offense has to start off 1st and 10 on the 20. Do something like that. But that team almost scored. Don't penalize that team and give possession to the defense because they couldn't recover the fumble and the fumble went in the end zone. Like, that's just stupid to me. But again, neither here nor there. Those are some little things about football in general that just chapped my hide, and it came out. So there it is. But overall, good win by LSU today. It's got to be exhausting for this offense, though, to have to continue to score 40-something points in order to make sure they have a victory. This reminds me of that Saints team years ago led by Aaron Brooks, where they would score 30 but give up more than 20. And I want to say that team ended up going like 8-8 or 9-7 maybe, or 7-9 or 6-10 or something like that year. Like, they just set records for most points scored in a season combined by both teams, because they would score so many points, but they would give up so many points. And this is just one of those things where, like, in if it was a basketball game, this team is the equivalent of, like, if the Golden State Warriors are averaging 120 a game, but they're also giving up, 112 on defense. Like, come on, you can't keep playing at that pace, because you're going to wear your defense out. You're not going to give your offense enough time to like put something together. You're putting too much pressure on them. You're making Jay Daniels have to be too perfect. And as much improvement as he's made from throwing in the pocket this season, and all those improvements, that can begin to deconstruct with the pressure of trying to score and trying to make plays. That can force him back into some bad habits. And I don't want to see that. And I think we're starting to see some of that. Not as much, but we're starting to see where there's certain plays where he may sometimes hold on to the ball a little too long, or sometimes he may not have the right touch on the ball. This game was really odd because of those passes, that the amount of passes that he threw, thinking he would throw the ball a lot more, and he didn't. And it almost led to some speculation. Well, maybe is there an injury or something? Is there something else going on? Did they just come in with this game plan and they're going to stick to it because the game is not that far out of hand or what have you? Who knows? But I just would like to see this offense get a little bit more consistent and start off a lot faster, uh, and stop starting off so slow. The defense, one thing that we did talk about in the game thread was someone said Mason Smith's lack of plays. And I kid you not, like 10, 15 minutes after we talked about it, and I commented because I said it looks like he's been playing really high. Like he's not playing with any leverage. And I know he's a big guy, 6'5", 6'6", what have you, but you have to play with leverage. You have to get underneath their pads. If you're too straight up and you just fire off the ball and you're straight up, it's easy for a man to get his hands inside of his pads and control you. No matter how big and strong you are, if your technique is poor, it makes it easy to control you and move you and make you go where I want you to go. So one thing that LSU needs to do is they brought back, oh man, what's the D-line coach? They brought him back, and I hope to God that he works with this defensive line because I really don't like seeing guys like that with so much talent. I know he's coming back off injury, but I like to see him like put that talent to better use, which is another reason why I was upset that Walker Jr. for Missouri got booted out of the game for his second personal foul penalty. The first one was just, honestly, it was just instinct. It was just instinct. The Powell was laying on his leg. He felt pressure on his leg, probably, feared for, injury and started kicking. It you can say it was malicious. You can say it was on purpose, but I've heard from people who have been on the bottom of those piles and whatnot and things like that. And the mentality is, there's some really cruel and crazy stuff that can go on at the bottom of a pile, right? However, uh, unless you've been on the bottom of one of those piles and know what that feels like, um, I'm not gonna judge anybody for saying, the guy was dirty or what have you, but I just know from people that I've talked to that have been in situations like that, if you panic, your instincts take over and you're gonna want to swing or kick or push, whatever it is. He just happened to kick. That was his instinct. So that's what happened. So we're not gonna, say Johnny Walker Jr. is some terrible guy or anything like that. But I really wanted to see him in the rest of that game because from the moment he got kicked out, I said, hey, that's gonna be huge. Next thing you know, LSU has a deep shot for a touchdown. Who's to say Jay Daniels would have had that time had Johnny Walker Jr. still been coming off that edge? Again, it's just one of those little things that happens throughout a game. If you look from that point forward and you look at how everything develops from there, I'm pretty sure you'll draw a correlation to where he had a lot more time to throw the ball, connected on a lot more passes, made the comeback and the sealing of the victory possible. Some other things that I'm looking forward to in this, in this season coming up and that we saw in this game was, Logan Diggs has really established himself as the guy as far as the running back position is concerned. But Brian Thomas Jr. is somebody to be reckoned with. And I know some people said that, someone commented that said, looked like Kyron Lacy was playing slow today. I mean, he looked fine to me. He was overthrown on the one play in the end zone earlier in the game. He had a pass interference on another short slant that he tried to catch for a touchdown later on in the game. He did catch the one pass for about 20 yards. But he looked fine to me. It was just, again, I think Jayden Daniels was just a little bit off today for some reason. And maybe that led to some of the more of the run calls instead of all the pass plays. Maybe that led to some of those miscommunications. But some of these guys, Malik had a drop, and Brian Thomas Jr. They both had drops today. I think there were a total of 3 drops, if I'm not mistaken. But I'll be looking that up and putting that in by the numbers today as well, because Jay Dames was 15 of 21. If I'm not mistaken, half of those incompletions were drops. I believe there were 3 drops today, but I'll be looking that up and putting that in the article and getting that out as soon as possible to you guys, probably tomorrow or today or something. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's just this team has a lot of deficiencies. They have a lot of things that they need to clean up as far as moving forward is concerned. It's just going to be a rough go of it if they can't get some of this stuff figured out. Because even though Alabama is having struggles at the quarterback position, I mean, you're seeing guys at the quarterback position give LSU all kinds of fits, and especially big, strong, athletic quarterbacks that can run, like Milroe can for Alabama. Looking at the Auburn game just next week, Auburn is no pushover. They're not going to just roll over for LSU and say, "Oh, okay, well, you guys are, in a better position to do something this season. We'll just roll over for you." It's not going to be like that. Matchup Predictor already has 75% people picking LSU to win that game. I do not see an opening line for that game as of yet. However, if I was just to guesstimate by everybody picking LSU and after their win today and looking at what Auburn has done, I'm guessing that'll be about I'd say anywhere from a 6 to maybe a 8 or so point favorite in favor of LSU. And that over and under is probably going to be somewhere in the 60s. Definitely in the mid 60s again, somewhere between 64 and 67, I'll say, will be that over under. Simply because this LSU defense gives up way too many points, and this LSU offense can score with anybody in the country. So just looking forward to that game next week. Looking forward to seeing what this team is going to do. If there are any changes that are going to be made, not quite sure if there's going to be any changes made. I don't foresee Coach Kelly making any changes on his staff or anything like that. I do not see any changes with the play callers or anything like that. If anything, I would say maybe changing up some of the starters, perhaps on defense. Maybe giving some of these other guys a chance to play. I could definitely see something like that happening. But I do not foresee any wholesale changes on this defense or on this coaching staff or anything like that. It's going to be interesting, but I would imagine if there would be any type of wholesale changes, it's going to take something very drastic. And if it didn't happen after the Ole Miss game and it does not happen after today's game, it probably won't happen until the offseason. So just looking forward, just got to grit and bear it, I guess, LSU fans. I don't know what else to tell you because, again, I really don't see much changing. I don't see a whole lot of wholesale changes on this team. Maybe changing up some starters or something like that. That's about it. But the whole Matt House was actually trending earlier today. There were over 12,000 tweets that mentioned Matt House. So he was trending. Harold Perkins was trending. And I believe, who was it? I took a screenshot of it just to see all the trends. And there were a few of them nationally. Yeah, it was Missouri, Matt House, and Harold Perkins were all trending at the same time earlier. Combined, there were roughly over 50 or so thousand tweets on those 3 different topics earlier. So I imagine a lot of that had to do with how terrible this defense was, how good Missouri was actually doing, and then Harold Perkins just making all sorts of crazy plays all over the field. He had a play where he damn near met the quarterback and the running back at the ball and stop the play in the backfield. The kid is just amazing. And you can never have too much of a Harold Perkins Jr. on your team. And it doesn't matter where they line him up or what they have him do, he excels at it. And that's a guy that, he plays that new linebacker kind of position where he's about 6'1", 220 or so. And you'd look at him and think, well, he's too small to play linebacker. He's kind of a stocky looking safety. What does he really play? Well, he plays football. That's what he plays. He's a football player. Let's just call it like that. But I'm really interested to see the more different ways that they use him this year. I mean, they use him on the edge. They put him in middle linebacker. He plays coverage. He rushes, the passer from blitzing in the linebacker position. He plays outside linebacker, and he just does so many different things. He's a guy that I'm always interested to watch, but I'm also interested to watch and see what Jayden Daniels does next week against Auburn. And if that rib injury he sustained on that play that we thought he scored, but there was a holding penalty, so I got called back. Nussmeier had to come in for a few plays. If that injury or if any other injury that he may have sustained earlier this week that, they just kind of kept hidden as to why the game plan was to run the ball more this week, or if he's just getting, beaten up and he's tired. But he took off and ran a bunch this game. And even though he took off and ran a bunch this game, he did do some good things with the ball. I mean, he ended up with, 15 carries for 130 yards. So, I mean, maybe there is no injury concern. Maybe I'm just making this up, but I don't know. It just seemed kind of odd that LSU wanted to come out and run the ball so much and not try to pass the ball more often. Although Missouri's pass defense is very good, because Gerard did make sure he mentioned that to me when we talked earlier. So that was just – it's going to be interesting to watch and see and how things go, what we do and what this team does, and what we have to look forward to when we're going through and looking at everything this week. But Missouri got their first loss of the season. LSU stays on track to win this division. Like I said, after last week's game, that was a setback, but it wasn't, a nail in the coffin. It was more of a speed bump. Get over it, move on to the next. This game, you had to win this game, because if you lost this game, even though it's against an SEC East opponent, it's still a conference loss. So they got to stay within range, and you can't have any more slip-ups the rest of this year. You cannot, lose to Auburn for sure next week. That's another must-win game because 2 losses in the conference, this means it's knocking you out of contention to win this division, which means you can't win the conference, which means there is no college football playoff well within reach. So moving forward, this team cannot lose another game this season. They won this week. Dramatic fashion. They needed a pick 6 in order to seal it. But again, it went along with my thought process of the last mistake will lose the game. The last mistake, the last sustaining drive, the last whatever it is. I knew this game would come down to something dramatic like this. And that's what ended up happening. LSU pulled it out. Next week, they have Auburn. We'll go from there. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the 5th quarter of Death Valley Insiders, Jermaine Every, analyst. So we will see you next week.